Welcome back to All Kings Considered. I'm Dan Casey, and once again, we're back to bring you the besteros that Westeros has to offer with our weekly breakdown of all things House of the Dragon. This week's Hot D was fun for the whole family. Make of that what you will. We're going to get into it in just a moment, but first, I need to introduce the small council joining me this episode. First up, she's our fearless features editor here at Nerdist, the owner of Faith and Flames Candles, and a novelist to boot. Please welcome Ty Gooden.
Hi, Dan.
Ty, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I am fantastic now that you are joining us here. Now, Ty, I have a very important question for you. If you were to, say, be a infamous spy master running a secret network of informants in King's Landing, what would your cool appellation be? What would your title be?
Ooh, I would be the Shadow Leopard because I'd be hanging out in the dark corners where you think no one's at, and I'd be stealthily creeping around to see what I could find out.
I love that. That is so much more immediate, so much more mystique than the White Worm like we got on the show.
I was a little disappointed.
I respect the humbleness of it, though. But Shadow Leopard, definitely a step above. Also joining us today, once again, we have our Nerdist staff writer, number one Sir Kristen Kroll hater, and our resident lore master, Michael Walsh.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me back.
Of course, Mikey. Always happy to have you. But, Mikey, I have a very important question for you. What are your thoughts on Prince Daemon's new haircut?
Dan, I was unaware that we could get haircuts during season 1. So that was a real eye-opener for me. And I have to seriously think about making some changes.
What you want to get the Prince Daemon instead? Which one? Which the before or after?
I thought I was supposed to grow it out so long that it looked like a bad wig, but apparently now I can be comfortable.
Don't worry. I think that wig will return before the season's end. At least I'm crossing my fingers that we'll just see maybe like a nice like combat mullet. That's something I'd like to see him rock later on in the season.
Yeah, that's what the realm's missing is a combat mullet. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I've always said it. It's the hill that I will die on someday. Anyway, folks, we're going to break down this episode in just a moment, but before we do that, a bit of a spoiler warning. To talk about this, guess what? We have to spoil House of the Dragon Episode 4. Shocking, I know. Now, as always, book spoilers will be kept to an absolute minimum, but if you're worried about that sort of thing, or if you haven't seen the episode yet, well, walk away now before you see something you probably shouldn't.
Don't look, Princess.
All right, folks, let's get into it, shall we? So I want to know, what were your overall impressions of this episode? Ty, let's start with you on this one.
Well, I definitely enjoyed this episode. It wasn't like super action-packed or anything of that nature, but there was a lot of good character development. So you got to see Alicent kind of show that she's more than a one-note character. You see a little bit of her frustration over the situation that she's in, that she really can't get herself out of. And then you've got, Daemon and Rhaenyra just causing all types of like havoc and drama and chaos. I loved every second of it.
Yeah, I think that line from King Viserys about "you are my political headache," that's like this series in a nutshell. He could say that to literally anyone, not just Rhaenyra, clearly Daemon as well. But no, I agree. It's definitely, we get some nice updates with all of these characters. Mikey, what about you? What were your thoughts on this episode?
I thought this episode flew by in the best way that Game of Thrones best episodes used to fly by. It was really compelling. The pacing was incredible, and you look up and all of a sudden you're like, wow, where did the hour go? And that's always a really good sign that we got a really good episode. So I think this might be in the running for the best of the 4 yet.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, especially now that we have established these relationships and we have a much better sense of how all of these power players kind of interact, it's definitely nice to see them. We got a lot of the Game of Thrones in every sense of the word. You got to see, you have that salaciousness that people associate with the series. You have a little bit of that brutality from the Blackwater v. Bracken battle at the beginning. And you get a lot of that sort of like backroom wheeling and dealing. So it was a nice episode, and very, I think, well plotted, very tightly paced as well. And I think it's kind of just lit the powder keg a little bit more. You can kind of see that fuse ticking down, and I feel like next week is when things are really going to explode. We had a bit less of a time skip this episode. I was having a bit of trouble placing it in the timeline. At one point, Daemon says it's been 4 years since he was banished in King's Landing in episode 1. So correct me if I'm wrong. episode 1 to episode 2 is 6 months. Then episode 2 to episode 3 is 3 years. So is this maybe another like half a year from that previous episode, you think, to bring it up to that like that 4-year mark?
I think it felt like it was anywhere from 4 to maybe pushing 5.
Okay.
I think I would prefer, I've said this in the past, I would prefer them to make it clear just to kind of center us and let us know. But I think the fact that they were vague shows that it's not super important the exact time, just that there has been some more time.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not trying to get bogged down the same way that I might in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but I think they've done a pretty good job so far of having someone very deliberately say, "Wow, can't believe that 6 months to the day have flown by since you did this thing last episode," and this time it was a little more. It came later too, because usually it comes in that like first couple of scenes, and this took until Daemon was speaking with Rhaenyra. But yeah, do you find that you're missing more of that time skip, or was it nice to see a little bit more sort of immediate continuity?
I mean, I was fine with the time skip and everything because it felt like it just moved things along quicker. You got to kind of these new plot points and, and kind of things of that nature. And going back to like with Alicent and kind of her development and growth and stuff. Now she's a mother of 2. And so she's really fully settled into her role as the queen, and people are starting to view her differently. And she's talking about her loneliness and her isolation and everything like that. And so that takes a little bit of time to be able to get there. So I'm glad that they, went ahead and moved ahead. When I saw her and I noticed that she wasn't pregnant, I was like, okay. And then when I saw the baby, I'm like, it's been about a year and a half then. So maybe a few months even longer than what we were originally thinking.
Yeah, I guess that is an excellent point. I totally spaced and forgot that we got to see Rhaenyra Targaryen this episode as well. So yes, some time has absolutely passed between episode 3 and episode 4. But we'll get into Alicent in a little bit. I want to talk first about the sort of the biggest spanner in the works for, I'd say, everyone in Westeros, and that is Daemon Targaryen. So what are your thoughts on Daemon's overall arc this episode? He kind of comes back to King's Landing under the auspices of like, hey, I've changed, but has he really? Mikey, let's start with you on this one. What are your thoughts about Daemon's arc this episode?
When he brought her into the brothel, I said out loud, I go, has there ever been a crazier bastard in Westeros than Daemon Targaryen? Like, it's just, whatever you think he's capable of, he's capable of much worse. It's one thing to take her out, and there's this great tradition of Targaryens sneaking out of the Red Keep and going down. Sir Barristan Selmy talks about how he used to go with Rhaegar, and they would get drunk and they would have fun. But he takes off his disguise. He takes off her disguise to bring her into the brothel. And it is so destructive that it is intentional. This is a guy who wants love, but also doesn't want love because I think he hates himself. I really do. I think he hates himself. And for him to do that is him desperately trying to destroy himself. And depending on if you like him or not, that might influence what you think of it. But no matter what, it's entertaining. He is an entertaining man. And from running into a 1,000 arrows being fired at him to taking his niece, the heir to the Iron Throne, into a brothel. No notes. Daemon Targaryen, the Rogue Prince. I love him. I love that. I hope he just continues to be the craziest person we've ever met.
Yeah, it's whenever we see him, he's always just like covered in blood, being a sad boy in the corner, or waking up hungover in some strange dungeon. Like that shot of him towards the end of him just being like hungover on the floor. He doesn't even have the strength to resist Viserys. He's just like, yeah, I really should have taken that hangover remedy from Massaria, but here we are. Yeah, he's truly the most, I think, chaotic person on this show. Ty, what were your thoughts on his arc this episode?
Oh yeah, I mean, he's just such an agent of chaos, and I absolutely love that so much. The fact that he would come back and bend the knee and do everything he can to win his brother's approval in front of everyone. Everybody's clapping and cheering like they were on some cheesy sitcom. And he does all of that and then turns around and basically uses Rhaenyra to stir up more drama and discord and stuff. And it just seems like he's just doing it for, I mean, I'm sure there are other ulterior, motives and stuff that may come out later on in the season, but it seems like he's just doing chaotic things for chaotic sake. And it's so interesting to see him from the very beginning of the episode where he comes in and he's got his own crown and he's in his armor and stuff, and he's kind of got his own title now, where he goes to the very end where he's being drug in like a drunkard off the street, and his brother is literally kicking him, while he's on the ground and telling him to get out and throwing him away like he's trash. Like, that's such a wild turn of events to go through within an hour, like, and really within the time period of the show. This happens all within probably not even a couple of days, maybe, if that long. It's wild.
Yeah, he wastes zero time in immediately burning the bridge that he just rebuilt over the course of 4 years. Like, that it is crazy. He's supposed to be this changed man, and then is just clearly up to his old tricks. He's definitely someone that can't get out of his own way, I think. And my bigger question, though, is something you touched on, Mikey, is, you said when he took off his disguise, it was planned. Do you think that it was his plan to create more problems for Viserys? Do you think he always wanted to marry Rhaenyra? That was his plan all along, to sort of ingratiate himself there in the Targaryen family tradition? Or is he just kind of like making it up in the moment, yes-anding, and trying to figure out, like, all right, well, them Targaryen boys are in trouble again. How are they going to get out of this one? Is like Daemon just sort of like free-falling through life?
Well, the first episode definitely implied that he had some long-term plans for Rhaenyra and wooing her. That scene where he gets the necklace for her and he puts it on, that felt like it was laden with certain undertones. So do I think he had a plan? I think Daemon is the type of person who has a lot of half-baked plans, and he thinks to himself, well, this might be good or that might be good, but sometimes he's just doing what feels good. He might have taken her out to kind of let her have some fun, to let her see, like, hey, these people aren't ready to accept you. And then he might have just decided, you know what, let's go to a brothel. Let's do it. That's fine. It's totally fine. Let's just completely self-destruct right here together. But he's really hard even to read in those moments because, he takes her into the brothel, and before they have sex, he stops. And it's not totally clear why he stopped. Before, we saw that he had some performance issues, right? Maybe that was it. Maybe it was a performance issue. Or maybe he kind of realized, this is a terrible thing I'm doing. Because we know that for all of his faults, Daemon does love his family. We've seen him in private with no reason to show love for his family, when he was scolding Sir Corlys Velaryon. So there is definitely this pull of Daemon, which is, I have ambition. I want to be loved, but I also love my family. And I think in that moment, let's put it this way, he might have had performance issues because he knew it was wrong.
It was interesting in the sort of inside the episode featurette. They were talking about how I forget who mentioned this. It might have been the episode director mentioning that part of the reason that he stopped is because he no longer had the power in that situation, because Rhaenyra was also enjoying herself and was consenting, and this is something that she wanted to do. And once it became clear that it's not sort of his machination and manipulation, he's like, I can't do this. And just sort of the script got flipped on him, and he kind of had to stock off for some more sad boy hours down in the bowels of King's Landing. But yeah, no, he clearly loves his family in every sense of the word, for better or for worse. But yeah, I'm more impressed by how sort of Rhaenyra gained some agency in this episode and kind of just became sort of the definition of gaslight gatekeep girl boss, between how she was talking to Alicent, how she then took what she wanted with Sir Criston Cole, and just even sort of immediately calling out to her dad. She's like, look, I know I messed up, but who do you think is watching me? Sir Otto. You might want to get rid of him, huh? So what were your thoughts on Rhaenyra this episode? Because I thought that she was a real standout in this episode. Had a lot to do and wasn't just sort of being ushered along this predestined path for herself. Ty, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, looking at it from my perspective, being a woman or whatever, she acted in so many ways that you would expect a young woman of around that age, maybe 17, 18, 19, to act, where you're trying to figure out who you are and where you fit into the puzzle of the world that you're into. You want to break away and buck away from things that you see as holding you back. You want to move back from traditions and stuff. And so she's trying to figure out, well, where do I fit in all of this? And what are the true desires of my heart? What do I really want? She's pretty clear about the things that she doesn't want. she's not really interested in getting married. She's not really interested in, kind of subscribing to all of the ideals of what womanhood is supposed to be within this time period or whatever. But what do I actually want? And so she got to unlock some of those, previously locked doors to her before. She actually got to have agency over the first, because the whole thing with Daemon just felt really manipulative to me, with him being an older, not only just being her uncle, because I mean, for us, that's weird, but also it's just him being an older man and kind of, taking her out of her safe space and showing her a place that he's used to being in and he's used to frequenting and stuff. And so she's never experienced those kinds of things before. So the power dynamic was definitely shifted in his favor. And she immediately took and reshifted the tide back in her favor by going after a man that she was attracted to and desired, because you also saw the seeds of that being laid through the last couple of episodes with the way that they have been interacting with each other and everything. So it was really, really cool to see her come into her own and get a feel for what the real world is actually like. She's always been outspoken and always been super driven and stuff, but I think that this episode is a real turning point for her and her womanhood, even if she has to go along with her father wants and kind of, step back from some of the desires and things that she wants. She now understands that I can still play this role to a certain degree, but that doesn't mean that I have to throw away all parts of myself or all desires. So I think that Rhaenyra is going to have kind of a dual personality where she's putting on this face to make her father happy, to make the people happy, to give the people the image that they want. But on the flip side of that, I think she'll have some things going on in the background that'll be interesting.
Yeah, it's been really cool to see her development over the course of these 4 episodes, because, when we first meet her in episode 1, she is sort of like relatively naive to some of the like inner workings of King's Landing, but has to grow up really quick. And it's kind of crazy how quickly she's taken to being this expert sort of manipulator, not manipulator, but someone who's able to seize opportunity when it's presented and sort of pivot when caught on the back foot. Because, with Daemon, like that sort of blows up in her face, but then she pivots and then goes after Sir Criston Cole, someone with whom she clearly has romantic chemistry and feelings, especially after their time together at the hunt. And also even when she kind of like realizes when she's been got, like when Viserys is like, hey, I know what you did. It doesn't even matter if you did it. The realm thinks you did, and now we have to do something about it. And she's still able to pivot there as well. But the scene that sort of stands out to me is the one with her and Alicent in front of the Godswood tree, where Alicent's like, well, my father overheard. I overheard my father talking about something he heard from his spies about you and your uncle, and she just mostly lies to her face. What were your thoughts on that scene, Mikey?
I thought Alicent had a much better episode than Rhaenyra, as weird as that might sound. I think in that scene, you really start to see the splintering of this relationship in a way that we thought we had seen. But then, this episode starts with them kind of reconnecting and realizing like, hey, this is a lot better with you around. But Alicent, the more she is kind of taking charge of her own position, even if she doesn't have the power she wants and she doesn't have the life she wants, I think she sees through it. And I think she realizes the same thing Viserys does, that it almost doesn't matter what happened. The point is you put yourself in a bad spot. And this is what people are going to think. And perception is reality. It's like when Viserys tells Tyrion, there are 3 men in a room, which one has the power? Whoever people think has the power. It's perception is reality and perception is power. And Alicent, I think, is recognizing that in a way that Rhaenyra is not.
Yeah, I think they did a good job of hammering that home as well, even beyond sort of like Alicent, who I appreciate her making this like private entreaty to try and like mend that bridge, because she's definitely tried repeatedly to mend that bridge. But when you see the puppet show on the Street of Silk and when on their Daemon and Rhaenyra's big night out, the puppet show where everyone's like booing Daemon, booing Rhaenyra, and they want young Prince Aegon on the throne. Yeah, it's like you're saying, the people don't perceive her as being the rightful heir, even though she is, and all the leal lords have sworn fealty to her. I think that's definitely going to be something big to contend with as we move forward. But Ty, what were your thoughts on especially like Rhaenyra and Alicent's relationship this episode?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like what Mikey said, where it's definitely hitting a big turning point. you know, like, I mean, they seemed like they were coming back together and kind of reforming their bond and stuff, but I could not believe that Rhaenyra actually swore on her mother.
Yes. Oh my God.
I'm like, I mean, you're not like fully lying, but you kind of lying. I know her mom's probably in whatever they believe afterlife being probably like, girl, like, I know you're not lying on me, because she really did. I'm like, dude, you took it a little far there. But I feel like if anything comes out in the future that proves that she was lying in any kind of way, that's just going to be the spark that really lights a fire between the two of them and really just splinters them and has them on two completely different sides of the coin. Like, it was just, I don't know, the conversation between them was just so, it was just so interesting and rich. And I love to see women getting together and having those types of conversations and being real about it. I mean, they didn't beat around the bush or any of that stuff. She was so upfront, but she was like, did you do this with your uncle? I want to try to protect you. I want to try to help you. Hey, you can't do things like this and think that it's okay. So I appreciated her still trying to be a friend, like Alicent still trying to be a friend to Rhaenyra and everything. But I mean, the way that Rhaenyra bounced around those questions, I was like, oh boy, this is gonna go bad.
When
Not
she
this episode,
swore,
but in the future. Yeah.
yeah, when she swore on her mom, I was like, oh, you have ascended into full on like King's
Right.
Landing political operative now. Okay, all bets are off. Like that yeah, I'm like, okay, you have come of age and now you are coming into your own as this like power player in West, like you, that was especially just seeing how much of a toll her mother's death took on her. She's now like, all right, well, you know what? I'm gonna play this guilt card because how dare you accuse me of something that I did?
Right.
But it's
Yeah,
funny
I mean,
because I was gonna say it's funny because we saw her earlier in the episode. She's really bad at playing the game. She's going on this realm tour of suitors, and she's just insulting them. And when you have the Lord of Storm's End, Lord Baratheon, telling you like that was unseemly, you know you've crossed the line. Not exactly like the most proper people in the Seven Realms.
Paragons of manners.
Yeah, so you know she doesn't totally get it yet, and it's one of the traits that it would help her from her father if she had, which is try to make people feel good, try to play the game, smile while they're in front of you, and then roll your eyes when they walk away, like an adult. Right,
and there's going to be some pretty big implications too. You know, she's now gotten Alicent's father removed from his position. Like, what's going to be her reaction to that? How is she really going to be able to do that? She's making all of these kind of snap quick decisions because of a lot of it being immaturity, but she's not realizing that all of these decisions have a domino effect. So now, because you've gone out and you've had your, you know, big night out with Daemon and you took that risk, now the domino effect is you're getting married and you have no choice and no say in it. Your you know, freedom has been taken away. I think, you know, her knowing that her dad wanted to try to appease her to a certain extent because of some guilt that he was feeling with her mother and everything, but she took it a step too far. And, you know, unfortunately, you live in a world where you have to behave like a princess at the end of the day. And the minute that you stepped outside of that circle and into anything that was remotely in the sexual realm, she was going to get shut back into the box.
Yeah, she partied with Sir around. Now she's getting married
Now
to Sir Find Out.
Right.
Yeah. I do like that the punishment for, hey, you were getting too close to your uncle, so now you have to marry your cousin instead. in the post show, Millie Alcock, who plays young Rhaenyra, was like talking about Laenor being like, it's also my cousin. There was a big pause, but it's Game of Thrones though, so there's that. she's aware of it. It was very funny. But yeah, it is very interesting that, like, you know, she, for as adept she can be in the moment, she is still definitely not as well versed as some of the other people, like Sir Otto Hightower, who finally gets smacked down this episode. So yeah, we'll come back to King Viserys in a minute, but I want to talk about, since we're talking about Otto, let's talk about how he goes from hand to the king to talk to the hand after Viserys summarily removes him from his position. So what are your thoughts on Otto, and what does that moment mean for him moving forward? Mikey?
I don't like Sir Otto Hightower, no matter how many times I've complimented him. He got called out for exactly what he is. Daemon had a different word for him, but I'll just say, you know, he's conniving. He's conniving. And Viserys, I think that scene actually reflected really well on Viserys, because the reason he's actually getting rid of Otto is different from what he says. But he gives a reason that is totally legitimate. Like, you manipulated me. You took advantage of my grief. You sent your daughter to my chambers, and you got what you wanted. And I'm only now realizing how selfish that was. And if you're acting on your own behalf and your own family's behalf, you're not acting on the realms, and you got to go. And it's great. It's really good from Viserys. And I don't think Otto Hightower was prepared for that at all. And, I saw in the after show, they talked about how, like, he saw the news, the spies report as this great moment of potential, right, to cut down Rhaenyra. But it didn't play that way on the show. It sort of played like he was unsure if he should play that card. And I think it's the first time we really saw that blow up in his face. And we saw that he's not necessarily quite the genius that he thinks he is. Not that he's not still dangerous, but I was very, very satisfied. I would like just a continuous loop for like a 10-hour YouTube thing of Viserys just removing the hand. It was so satisfying. Oh, it was like as good as it felt when Daenerys named Tyrion the hand of the queen, which was a moment I was so overwhelmed that I could barely watch it. This was the opposite, but just as good. Just so satisfying. I hate that face. I hate smug Otto Hightower. I hate his whole family.
Shout out to Risa Fons for doing an incredible job as Otto Hightower, by the way.
He's been phenomenal.
Yeah.
He's been phenomenal.
No, that's how you know you're an amazing actor. It's like with Jack Gleason as Joffrey. You're like, wow, you were so diabolical. I must destroy you, but also great job. Yes. I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's interesting to see him sort of get punished for that this episode. There's a shot of him. I think it's after he gets the news and he kind of like sighs and looks up a little bit. The camera's framed from the top looking down at him. And he's almost like weighing like, should I do this? Is this this is not going to be good. Like, no matter what, this is not going to be good. Even if it works out in my favor, like I'm going to stir the pot with this one. And it's also nice to see Viserys not be a total like clown, because you just see him sort of getting like last episode, he was just like the lonely drunk king and like everyone wants something from him, trying to take their pound of flesh. And this time he's like, no, I know that you want Aegon on the throne. I know that you sent Alicent to comfort me, so I would be like seduced by her and like take her as my wife. It's nice to see that he's not completely unaware, because it did kind of feel like Viserys was just had like some blinders on. But Ty, what were your thoughts about King Otto? Yeah, it's what he wants about Otto Hightower and Viserys this episode, especially that moment where he's being confronted.
I think that he knew that moment probably was going to come at some point in time, but he definitely wasn't anticipating it coming as quickly as it did. He thought he still had more time to be able to play his manipulative games and have his spies out there. And really the whole thing with Daemon and Rhaenyra was like a great stroke of luck for him, because it's kind of killing two birds with one stone. I can get both of these people out of the way who are threatening, what I really want, what my ultimate goal is. I can get both of them out of the way at the same time. So this is great for me. So it was really pure luck that he got that. But, once things actually happened and he got called in, and that final conversation happened of him being removed as the hand, I think he was probably thinking in his mind, like, I'm disappointed, I'm regretful, but I didn't get a chance to gain my ultimate goal before I got there. I think he really thought that at some point in time he would be removed as the hand. He just didn't think it was going to be before he was able to manipulate all of the things that he wanted and get all the puzzle pieces into place.
Yeah, it was also cool to me to see the extent of his resources, because he's the hand of the king. Obviously, he's going to be apprised, but so far we've only really seen people kind of come whisper to him or him in council meetings. But seeing that the network of spies, like the White Worms network of spies in King's Landing, report directly to him, that was pretty awesome.
And that's what makes like Daemon's choice even more kind of egregious, because it's like you totally know that, like you. Literally in the very first episode were you not spied upon and the king was told what you said about the heir for a day, and that literally got you bumped out of the alignment. So he knew that. So that just feeds right back into the fact that he did this on purposely just to cause discord and just be an agent of chaos.
And to add in, And exactly. And to add insult to injury there, you find out the White Worm is Missaria, who is still clearly pissed off at Daemon for the shenanigans he pulled in episode 2, saying that she was pregnant and they were getting married. And she's like, okay, that's it. I'm out of here. I'm just going to be the spy master, the mistress of whispers for all of King's Landing. And you can kick rocks when I get you kicked out of King's Landing.
Right.
It's only
That
business.
makes so much sense, though, that she would be that person, because Daemon is the type of person that even if you can't see him and he's not physically there, he can't be out of sight, out of mind. So you need to have somebody to have eyes on him and be close to him at all times. So it totally makes sense that she would be that person, because she can have eyes on him even in the months and the, you know, time periods and stuff that he's been away. They still can kind of keep an eye on what he's doing and what his activities are, because you never want to count him out. Like he can't be out of sight, out of mind.
The last time he was out of sight, out of mind, he murdered exactly 1,000 pirates. And before that, he chopped off a bunch of body parts of all the people of King's Landing in episode 1. So, yeah, I guess he does need a chaperone, is what I'm trying to say.
We all have our ways of relaxing.
Yeah, I guess so. But I have a very different way of relaxing when I go to get crab legs than Daemon does. So, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I want to move on to Alicent. And my question is she the only decent person in King's Landing? You know, we kind of touched upon her earlier this episode, but wow, what a heartbreaking episode for Alicent, with just, she's being gaslit, she's being sort of like isolated, like the way they intercut the sex scenes with Rhaenyra and Daemon and her and Viserys was just absolutely brutal. Shout out to the editors and the directors of this episode for that sort of pairing there, because you just really get to see just how miserable she is. And the line that really resonated with me is when sort of the beginning, when we're coming fresh off the sort of like, it's played for comedy of Rhaenyra being like courted by both someone who knew her great grandmother and a literal child. And then Alicent's like, wow, having your choice of any man in the realm, that sounds pretty great. Sure would be a shame if you were forced to marry your best friend's dad because your dad told you to. And then she's just kind of, and we're just kind of blow past it like, oh, it's not that nice. So what are your thoughts on Alicent this episode? Ty, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think Alicent had such an interesting coming into her own, and we really got a chance to understand her a lot more as a person and what she was going through. It was really difficult to see her. For me, you know, even outside of the sex scene, just seeing her standing in the window, looking out, you know, the window, and she's holding baby and she's bouncing the baby and stuff. And you could just see like the frustration and the annoyance and the sadness and the regret, as though she's looking out like people are out there living their lives. And I'm literally trapped in this space. Everybody holds me up because she's literally above the city. And so they hold her up to that high regard, but she has nothing there. And she, you know, she feels like she just has no one to be able to turn to. And her only friend that she had to marry her friend's dad. Like, that is worst case scenario that you could possibly go through. But, you know, I think with Alicent, she just is trying to figure out how she can make the best of the situation she's in, and try to figure out how can I possibly regain any kind of power and regain any kind of agency at all. Because I think there's a lot of jealousy with Rhaenyra and the choices that she's able to make and the freedoms that she's able to have, because she no longer has access to that. So, I mean, she's going to be going through this arc and kind of this journey of, how do I do this? Who can I trust? And, you know, what can I do to make my life seem like it has meaning and to find joy and some kind of joy and semblance of happiness and stuff in my life. So I think she's going to end up kind of chasing that journey.
Yeah. And it was also just brutal at the end of that sort of like, you know, at the end of that sort of like intercut scene where she's just lying in bed, like clearly miserable, and she's looking up, and then on the top of this like beautiful 4-poster like bed for royalty, you just see a rat crawling across the like the top bedpost. So Mikey, should we read this that it's part of the shared universe with the departed, or what did you make of that rat?
Well, I'm glad to know I'm not the only one who immediately thought of The Departed and how much he hates that stupid rat at the end. But yeah, you know, there's certain things I can't talk about, but I wonder if that rat had meaning beyond what was going on in that scene. I can't wait someday to talk about what that means for people who are unfamiliar with the story. As for Alicent, and if she's the only good person in King's Landing, I will not stand for this Lord Strong erasure.
Oh yeah, I forgot about Lord Strong.
Do not leave out my boy, the only guy given good counsel. For those who are in the same boat as me, who are familiar with the story and the big moments and how it's going to end, one of the things that's been both fun and tough is to watch this show, which is, it's coloring in the lines. Fire and Blood, George R. R. Martin's story has a lot of the broad strokes, and the show's painting in the lines to give it more life. Literally, you're bringing some of these characters to life that are just, people who are there at these events. And I have to fight off what I know is going to happen and what I think I know about them. So did I find myself in this episode liking Queen Alicent Hightower more than I usually do? Yeah, of course. She was sympathetic. As long as you can ignore the fact that she is also a queen who's living in royalty in a world where most people absolutely suffer. What did Daemon call it? Daemon called it some sort of terrible world, right? He said it's a tragic world or something like that. So I always, let's not give the rich. And she comes from one of the oldest and most ancient noble houses in the Seven Kingdoms. So, but yeah, she is far more sympathetic, and that's something the show has done. I think when we first started talking about this, Dan, I said that this always kind of read to me as a story of villains, but an entire story of villains wouldn't really be all that interesting. And the show has definitely given us reason to see other people's perspective and to see, their point of view and to make them characters that are worth rooting for. And I think that this episode did a good job of that with both of their young actresses. Even if Rhaenyra, I think makes some major, major mistakes in this episode that gets to the heart of the story, which is what you want more important than what you should probably do, right? And we saw her father make a selfish decision by marrying someone out of love as opposed to duty, and all the problems that caused. And here we have Rhaenyra, who, everybody lets her know, this isn't fair. It's not fair. We get it. The world's not fair. But this is the world you live in. And you're already behind the 8 ball because people don't want to accept a queen as their ruler. So are you going to do what feels good? Are you going to do what you want to do? Or are you going to do what you probably should do? So the fact that Alicent is on the other side of this episode trying to do the right thing, even though it brings her no joy herself, I thought was a real nice, dichotomy between the two.
Yeah, and I think that it's definitely you see that sort of play out a lot in this episode. That the immediate consequences for, when you do the thing that you want to do, even though sometimes you can't, you are going to have to face consequences for that. But I think at least in Viserys' case, it almost wound up working out perfectly because Rhaenyra winds up, she's his political headache, but she also winds up being the solution to his biggest problem, which is Lord Corlys Velaryon threatening to go form an alliance with the with the Sea Princes of Bravos. Sea Lords, excuse me. With the Sea Lords of Bravos. So let's talk about that. How he swerved the House Valyrian by not marrying their 12-year-old daughter, which great call. Don't do that. You're an old man. But now he's pairing off Rhaenyra with Laenor, who we did see in episode 3 riding on sea smoke during the battle of the crab with the crab feeder and the stepstones. So what are your thoughts on this sort of marriage plan and what it means? Like, do you think this is going to solve all of their problems, or will this just create further fractures and divisions among the people of King's Landing? Ty, what are your thoughts on sort of how this problem seems to be solving itself?
I mean, I think it's going to be a little bit of both. I think it will solve some problems temporarily because you are, aligning with someone else and you're kind of building up that strength and everything. But anytime you make any kind of political move like that, there's always going to be some kind of unintended consequence that comes behind it. And we just have to wait and see exactly what that consequence is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, no one's ever going to be happy. I always think about that quote from, was it Ramsay Bolton? If you thought this had a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention. That's Game of Thrones in a nutshell. Like, everyone is going to be miserable at different times. Sometimes you'll be ahead. You might have a good day, but ultimately you're probably going to be pretty miserable. Mikey, what do you think about this and how things are shaping up on that front?
The most pertinent line from Game of Thrones for all of this is Maester Aemon, who said, "Love is the death of duty." And, whether it's somebody you love or something you love to do, it makes you do things you shouldn't. And we see the issues. We can talk about how this is an opportunity for King Viserys to kind of fix a mistake he made. But the ramifications of him not marrying Laenor Valyrian are so big that it's almost tough to think of anything else that matters more, because he was right. They needed more heirs potentially. Everybody's always, as his father, Balin the Brave, he died from a ruptured appendix. They're always one appendix away from that's it. If Rhaenyra is his only heir, that's it. So he did have to get remarried. He did have to have more kids. But if he married Laenor Valyrian, her mother got passed over for the throne twice. If any house in the entire kingdom was going to support Rhaenyra's ascension to the throne, it was that family. He chose love over duty, and he created all of these problems. And, I don't think he can fix them by marrying her off to Laenor Valyrian. It might solve some short-term problems, but it doesn't address the bigger problem, which stupid Otto Hightower clearly recognizes. And some level, Daemon recognizes too, like, this is not going to go the way you want or hope or think.
Yeah, and it's also interesting, sort of Viserys realizing is like, I really should have, in hindsight, I really should have married this girl, but I didn't. But now you can solve my problems. But then he also plays the card again. We see that Valyrian steel dagger that belonged to Aegon the Conqueror, and before that, Aenor Targaryen was. Correct me if I'm wrong. Aenor was the Targaryen who brought all of the Targaryens over from Valyria. Is that correct, Mikey?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this Valyrian steel dagger, which has this big through line through Game of Thrones as well. And then we find out that it has a secret message written on it from Aegon the Conqueror himself. It's got his dream emblazoned on it. I struggle a little bit with this because they keep playing up this sort of element of prophecy and like, well, we're the ones who need to defend the realm. And he kind of uses that to guilt trip his daughter a little bit, but then he's not sort of living up to that prophecy himself. What are your thoughts on that scene in particular, and sort of finding out about this weird pyromancer dagger?
I think it's very important for them to keep reminding us of his dream, because it's completely framing everything that happens on this show. The fact that it didn't say drink more Ovaltine was great. I just, you want to make sure those secret messages have a payoff. But I think the bigger problem with that dagger having that secret message is that for a show and a story that really does lean into prophecy, and they tend to kind of prove to be true, not the way people think. Prophecy almost always turns out it's like a monkey's paw. But if you're looking at the franchise as a whole, the decision to have Arya kill the Night King with this dagger, it just doesn't fit. And you can make the argument within Game of Thrones that, like, well, the prophecy was wrong. There was no prophecy, right? But then Jon Snow is the one who kills Daenerys, and the Song of Ice and Fire really doesn't make sense. And it just, the fact that now exists after the show, or before after the show, it definitely kind of makes me be like, I really feel like they made a change for the sake of making a change, as opposed to telling the story that they were supposed to be telling. So I guess that's a roundabout way of saying I didn't like the Game of Thrones ending.
It always comes back to that. But Ty, what were your thoughts on that scene?
Yeah, I just found the scene to be like, I don't have the book knowledge and kind of that overall knowledge that Mike has or whatever, but I thought it was interesting that they definitely kept kind of circling back around to that prophecy, and dreams kind of anchor the whole story. And it seems like when they had previous conversations about it, like he used it to he's been using it in a couple of different ways. So it seems like when they had conversations and stuff, like I think in episode 1 or 2, he's like, I'm telling you this because I trust you, because I want to put you into this position, because I recognize that just because things are customary or legal and stuff doesn't make it necessarily right. And so you really are the rightful heir as my daughter. And then he turns around and uses that same, type of prophecy, that same type of language and stuff to also put her into a box and say, you go up here and you do this and you do what I tell you to do. So I found that, like, that was the part that I found the most interesting about it, is that he's just using it to like kind of manipulate things in a lot of different ways.
It does feel like the kind of like ultimate parenting tool in that regard, where you're like, look, I don't know what to tell you. There's a prophecy that if you don't do what I say and behave, the world's going to end. So do your part. It's just like, it feels like he deploys it sometimes when convenient. Like the first time felt very earnest. This time felt more like, I think I need to remind you of the apocalyptic stakes that we're facing if you don't behave and act.
I'm going to shame you into doing what I tell you, what I tell you to do.
So I want to go from prophecy real quick to conspiracy, because we got another scene this episode of, King Viserys' condition is worsening by the episode. He's not looking good. He's looking pretty scabby. So Mikey, can you tell us a little bit about the Grand Maester conspiracy and what people might be talking about here?
Careful what you wish for. I love the Grand Maester conspiracy. I love it.
Yes,
it's one of my
please do, because I've been waiting for you to talk about this, so I am all in.
So this is not a spoiler. We all know at some point dragons are going to be gone, right? There'll be no more dragons. I'm not spoiling it. If you call that a spoiler, I'm going to just lose it. So don't. You'll take out the dragon in me. At some point, dragons are going to disappear. The Grand Maester conspiracy has two major parts. One, which will happen, is the idea that dragons did not just die off. They were killed off by the Maesters working in secret. Because the Maesters believe in a world of science and knowledge. And dragons are magical creatures. And the Grand Maester conspiracy says that the Maesters do not want dragons. And if they don't want dragons, that means they don't want Targaryens. So the fact that King Viserys, the throne is hurting him, right? But they're not like, he's not getting his arm cut off, right? He's just getting these little wounds, and they somehow don't get better. In the first episode, we saw he had the back wound, and for some reason, the Maesters are like, oh, we probably have to write to the Citadel to learn how to treat this. It's like, what are you doing here? You're the Grand Maester of King's Landing. Why don't you know how to do that? So there is definitely an implication that they are maybe letting him not be well, that they are not treating him the way they should, because they don't want Targaryens, they don't want dragons. The other part of the Grand Maester conspiracy is that the Grand Maesters work for themselves. So the Citadel sends them out to all of these castles and homes. Everybody kind of has, any house that matters has a Maester. But it's thought by some, and George R. R. Martin gets into this in A Song of Ice and Fire, the novels, that they're really working together, and they are their own little collection, sharing information. And the reason that this is pertinent to House of the Dragon is the Citadel is located in Old Town, and House Hightower are the lords of Old Town. Nobody is closer to the Maesters and the Citadels than them. And when you think of that in episode 1, Otto Hightower sends a message not to his brother, not to the Lord of Hightower. He sends a message to the Citadel. Why? What is he got to do with them? What's going on there? So there's the Grand Maester conspiracy is going to, the word loom might not even be right. It might end up proving very direct in the actions that happen. And I would never trust a single Maester. We saw the Grand Maester in Game of Thrones. He wasn't even loyal to the king. He was loyal to House Lannister, Pycelle. Don't trust any Maester unless it's Sam. Unless it's Sam Tarly. That's it. One Maester, Maester Aemon, I guess I also love. That's two. That's it. Everybody else, just very cautious. Don't share big secrets with them.
Yeah, I mean, he's losing parts by the episode. Like he's missing his fingers, and they fixed the VFX this time, so he's clearly missing those fingers. Those sort of maggot manicure did not work, or maybe it did work as intended if that was what they wanted. It's definitely a fan theory that I like quite a bit, and I think there's more evidence for this one than certain Varys Merman related things that I could think of. But I'll be very interested to see this unfold, especially like you were saying, given that the citadel is located in the seat of power of House Hightower. So it'll be really fascinating to see what happens as this series keeps going. But as we wrap up the episode, I want to know who is your MVP for this episode? Who do you think made the biggest splash? Who was the most impactful? Who impressed you the most? Or who was just your MVP just because you liked them the most? Like last time, mine was a completely inconsequential person who just made me laugh. Ty, who is your MVP?
My MVP is Rhaenyra. She snuck out in her 2010 like hipster clothing. She got a chance to hang out in the streets with her uncle and like experience things she had never experienced before. She got back and like hooked up with a hot dude. So cheers to her on that. And then she successfully lied to a whole bunch of people and was bold enough to even swear on her mom, which that takes a lot of guts. So congratulations on that too. And she also not only went along with what her dad said for the most part, because she's like, yeah, I know I can't really fight that fight, but I can get Otto Hightower out of here, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to gaslight my dad into making this happen. And she did all of that. So I think she accomplished a lot. She's still a boss. I love her. And like, she's my favorite character in general, but this episode, like, is probably my favorite, like the most favorite episode of her that I've seen is actually this one. So
yeah, I do like, she's like, if I'm getting married, you're getting fired. I'm taking you down with me. And right. Yeah, I'm going to be sad to see her, Millie Alcock and Emily Carey move on. It seems like we're going to have them at least for one more episode, but I could see next episode perhaps being the last episode we have with these two actresses, or maybe we'll finally get that time skip in the final episode of the season. Who knows? I'll be very intrigued to see how that plays out there. But Mikey, who's your MVP for this episode?
I have a big tie. It's literally every single character, even the extras, except for Sir Criston Cole. So I have everybody else.
Okay,
everybody else is the MVP. They did a great job. No notes. Fantastic work.
Why is Sir Criston Cole your LVP?
I hate Sir Criston Cole. I don't care what this show does to color in the lines of him. I'm not sure there's anybody I hate more. I would let Joffrey reign if Joffrey's first act was to behead Sir Criston Cole. And while I can't get into all of this, I can't really get into a lot of it. But what a horrible, horrible person. What a horrible, horrible. You took an oath. You took an oath to protect. She raised you up from nothing. Your family is nothing. Nobody knows the Coles. Nobody wants to know the Coles. And here, this young princess raised you up, gave your family significance for the first time in its miserable, stupid, useless, insignificant existence. And what did you do? What did you do? You took advantage of a drunk girl. You are despicable, Sir Criston Cole. Despicable.
So we'll see if Mikey's opinion gets revised as we see more of Sir Criston Cole.
It will not. It will not. It will only get more intense.
Yeah. God, that whole scene was just like, man, even just getting ready for bed in medieval times must have been a huge pain in the ass if you have to unlace exactly 1 million layers of clothing, even just to go to bed. But yeah, we'll see. I think Sir Criston Cole is already sort of regretting everything that he did in this episode, but we'll see what happens as it continues to unfold. My MVP for this episode, not necessarily because he was the most effective. He's always still kind of being manipulated and pushed around, but King Viserys, just because I thought we had sort of like a masterclass from Paddy Considine this episode of, his scene alone, his scenes with Alicent where they're alone, his scene with Rhaenyra where they're sort of talking about like how she's just creating all these problems for him. But my favorite was the scene with him and Otto Hightower, where you just finally get to see him kind of stand up for himself, even if it is for kind of the wrong reasons, where he's like, okay, I have to do something about this. But it was just nice to see that he's not completely ineffectual after we've sort of seen him kind of in various states of despair or sort of feeling a little bit more lugubrious in his actions. So it was nice to see him take a more active role and just kind of chew the scenery in that scene in the best way possible. So as we move on, looking to next week and looking forward, do we have any parting thoughts, any predictions? I know that there's rumors that we might see a fan favorite character, Mushroom, next episode. Any predictions on that front?
If we don't get Mushroom at some point, whether it's next week or not, it would be like Poochie not getting to the fireworks factory times a gazillion. Like, at this point, it almost feels like nothing else actually matters except Mushroom showing up. Just bring us Mushroom. That's all we want. And if there is definitely somebody who could be Mushroom in the preview for next week. I don't know if it'll be Mushroom or not, but I would say that if you were upset we never got Lady Stoneheart, there will be riots in the street if we don't get Mushroom. I don't know where we'll meet. I don't know how all 7 of us will even get together, but we will riot in the street.
We will choose a point on Google Earth and make it our virtual background on Zoom. Oh my God. Ty, what about you? Any predictions or anything you're looking forward to seeing play out next week?
I mean, I'm just very curious about what's going to happen with Rhaenyra and Alicent's relationship from this point forward. I haven't seen any previews or anything, and I've been purposely like not watching previews and stuff because I want to go into each episode like completely unaware, of what happens so that I can form my own opinions and all of that. But I'm just really curious about what's going to happen with their splintering in their relationship. Like that's the most interesting part for me.
Okay,
yeah.
Ty, sorry, Dan. I was going to say I'm going to give Ty two things that she doesn't have to look ahead; she can look back.
Okay.
There is a moment of foreshadowing in this episode that is very, very subtle. That if I even said what it is, it would be a monster spoiler. But if you rewatch this episode, pay very close attention because it is huge. The other is, it might not seem like a big deal, but the secret passage from Rhaenyra's room. I'm so happy they included it because we've talked about the Red Keep and all these hidden passages. Maegor just killed all the people who built them so they wouldn't know the secrets. That is just a huge, huge moment that will have big dividends later on. And of all the things that happened, it might have been the one I was most excited for. Ooh, a secret passage! Can't wait.
With railings,
yeah,
so thoughtfully designed.
Well, you gotta be safety and secrecy.
Yeah, safety first in King's Landing because last thing you want to do is die falling down a secret passage where no one will find you.
Yeah, die drunk at that because if you're coming back, you're definitely drunk.
Oh, yeah, and having to walk up that. No wonder she took the front door because walking back up those long passageways, no thank you.
Oh, and I don't know if everyone noticed this, but because if you didn't watch the subtitles, with the subtitles, I missed it. The knight she runs into on the streets is Sir Harwin Strong.
Mm-hmm. Break bones.
Sir Harwin, if we could play it, can we play a bell? Can we put a bell in? Okay.
We'll add that in post, definitely. Okay, yeah.
Make it
definitely
a good
won't
bell.
Replace it with an air horn.
Make it a good bell, not the ones they played when Daenerys took over King's Landing.
Oh, boy. All right. Well, on that note, folks, it's time to wrap things up, but don't worry about us crying uncle, because we'll be back next week with another breakdown of House of the Dragon, and if you want to dive even deeper into all things Hot D, we've got you covered over on Nerdist.com. I want to thank my friends and my small council again for joining us today. Ty, where can people find you online?
People can find me on Twitter at Ty Gooden.
Amazing. And Mikey, where can people find you?
They can find me on Twitter at Burger Mike if they have any questions or comments. And they can also find all 3 of us at the greatest website anybody ever created, at Nerdist.com.
And you can also find Mikey at that 7-person meetup later on in the season. Thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you to everyone who tuned in. But in the meantime, folks, tell us, what did you think about this episode? What was your favorite moment? Let us know in the comments below, and for the latest and greatest in the world of pop culture, make sure you stay tuned to Nerdist.com.